Welcome everyone to our fourth hangout of Experts on Air, hosted by the Google Developer Expert team from around Africa. To introduce the GDE program, Google Developer Experts are recognized by Google as experts on various Google technologies, such as Android and cloud. Every month we host a show as a live hangout on air, and each month we present a theme. Today's theme is implementing material design on Android. After the show, you'll be able to download the MP3 podcast, and we'll also make the video available on YouTube to watch later. To introduce our panel today, we've got Alex Koller, and he's an Android GDE from Cape Town in South Africa, and he's going to be presenting the Android talk. We've got Johan Dutoy and Hiran Patel, and they're both cloud GDEs from Cape Town. We've got Fermi Taiwo, and he's a cloud GDE from Lagos, and Kenneth Kinyonyui, cloud GDE from Nairobi in Kenya. We've got Dario Mongoy, and he's one of our newest GDEs, and his specialty is also Android, and he's joining us from Maputo in Mozambique. Also joining us today is Eugene Mutai, an AngularJS GDE from Nairobi. And from the Google team, we've got Mercy Oranji, and she's in charge of the Google developer ecosystem, and she's a community manager for Sub-Saharan Africa, with a main focus on Google Launchpad. And myself, Dale Humby, also a cloud GDE, and I come from Cape Town, and I'll be hosting your show today. First up, we're going to hear from our spotlight speaker, who's Fermi, and he's one of our newer GDEs, telling us about himself and what's happening in his community in Nigeria. Then we're going to have Alex, who's going to be presenting our topic for today, implementing material design on Android. After which we're going to have a 5-minute question and answer session where you can post your questions in the Hangout on Air Q&A app, the G+ event page, or the Google Developer Africa's Community G+ page. And we'll give Android GDEs Alex and Dario a chance to answer your questions. And then we're going to have a quick wrap-up at the end. So first up, we've got Fermi. Fermi, you're one of our first Google Developer Experts in West Africa. Can you tell us a bit about your story and how you got into being in software?
Right. Thanks, Dale. I'm glad to be here. My name is Fermi Taiwo, and I am a developer expert on cloud, the first, like I mentioned, here in West Africa. I am the CTO for a company I co-founded 6 years ago. We are called Init, and we build solutions mostly around identity management. So you asked about my story. I began programming about 12 years ago with QBasic on a 133, and I have spent quite a bit of time moving around 5 or 6 different languages. I've sort of settled on just 2, that's Python and PHP. I love tinkering, weekend hacks, creating small apps, small stuff. I'm the kind of CTO that still likes to write a lot of code.
Cool. And part of the work that you do is to help organize events around Lagos. What sort of events are upcoming that we could go to?
Across the world. It's called a Dev Fest. A Dev Fest brings together hundreds of developers in one location to learn, share, and interact. Here in Nigeria, there are 6 of them. We've already had 3. We're awesome, and there's one happening now in Abuja this weekend, next week in Kano, and finally one in Lagos at the end of November. You can find out more about them and the links we will share after this podcast.
Cool, thank you. And you also have made a couple of apps in your past. Anything that you're famous or infamous for?
Yes. Our most popular gig is a software we wrote that was used to register 71 million people in Nigeria for the general elections. We built a software to do that. And with respect to apps, it would be News Basket. It's a mobile app focused on news in Nigeria, and something that we just released again today.
And recently you've migrated News Basket to material design, right?
Yes. There's now a new version we put up on Play Store today. It was created using material design principles, and the feedback from our first set of users has been quite good. We're happy with it. looks, it feels it was before.
Great, thanks, Fermi. I'm now going to hand over to Alex, and he's going to tell us how we can migrate our apps to material design, like Fermi did for his news basket app. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Dale. Yes, hello everyone, I'm Alex, and we're going to walk through implementing some material design patterns on Android. So just a quick recap on what material design is. It's a design framework for implementing a consistent design across multiple platforms, including the web and native mobile. It focuses on bold colors, tangible surfaces, and meaningful motion. But we're not going to focus too much on the theory of it, because in our previous episode of this Hangout on Air, Hiran Patel covered that and implementing it on the web. So be sure to check that out if you are still interested in material design. We can have lots of XML layouts and code snippets in this presentation, but don't worry about getting all of that detail down. These slides and more information will be available after the show. So why Go material? Well, ultimately, it's to improve the UX and success of your app. Using a design that's consistent with the operating system design builds the user's trust in your app and your brand. Case studies suggest that a well-implemented material design can significantly increase conversions within an app. Google Developer Story videos are first-hand experiences of developers using Google products. And we're going to look at a few of those now where the teams actually implemented material design. Up first is Trello, which is a visual collaboration tool that gives teams a shared perspective on projects. And they found that after implementing material design, they saw a significantly increased engagement from users across most of the tasks within the app. The next one we're going to have a quick look at is The Hunt, which is a style and product sharing community. And they found that in comparison to platforms where they didn't have a material design, they saw a 30% improvement in starting hunts. And this is a strong indication that people want to interact with material design. The last one we're going to have a quick look at is Pocket Casts, which is a leading podcasting app on Android. They found that material design helped them make the app available across all forms of Android, including Android Wear, Auto, TV, and Chromecast. And this led to a 30% increase in sales. So be sure to watch these and more developer story videos to learn how those who have already found success have done it. So now that you're convinced that material design is something you want to do with your app, how are we going to go about doing it? Well, that's where the design support library comes in. It's part of the support library family on Android. It adds support for various material design components and patterns for app developers to build upon, such as navigation drawers, floating action buttons, snack bars, and tabs. It also lets you apply material styles to all existing components, such as edit text, checkboxes, and dialogues. And possibly most importantly, it lets you build a consistent material design all the way back to Android 2.1. So to implement this design support library in your app, simply add this dependency to your Gradle build file. As you can see, I've listed other support libraries that are available, and these will help you create a more complete material design, such things as card views and recycler views. But we're going to focus just on the support design library for now. So the first thing you'll do is set up your application theme. And it's important to note here that we're extending the theme.appcompat themes. And that makes sure that the material attributes are applied to your app. And then we'll want to define a few colors. Color primary, primary dark, and color accent are the main colors that will be used throughout your app for styling and giving color to things such as toolbars and action buttons and accents to all of the controls. We're going to have a quick look at how to implement a few material UI components. The first one we're going to have a look at is quite a common pattern, where there's a app bar and flexible space at the top of some scrollable content on your screen. As you can see on this slide, as the user scrolls up, the top section gets collapsed into a more compact version of that. So to get started, the first thing we need to know a bit about is the coordinator layout. This is a new layout that was introduced in the design support library, and it coordinates animation behavior between views inside of it. It's possible to define your own behaviors, but basic ones are provided for floating action bars, app bars, and snack bars. So basically, it lets the views inside of that layout interact with each other without those views knowing too much about the other views. So let's get into our app bar layout. So this XML layout shows that we have an app bar layout at the top, and inside of that, a collapsing toolbar layout. And that's the one that's responsible for actually collapsing the space and moving the views around inside of it. And you can see we've set some scroll flags on that view. We've set it to scroll and exit until collapsed. And that says that when the user scrolls, that section should also scroll, and it should be collapsed until the user starts scrolling back down again. And inside of that layout, we have two views, an image view and a toolbar. The image view is acting as a flexible space in this example, and the toolbar will be pinned at the top. And that's set the collapse mode to pin, so it'll stay there. And on the image view, our collapse mode is set to parallax, and that means it'll scroll with a parallax effect, slightly slower than the content below it. That's all you need to implement that pattern. It's quite straightforward. Next, we'll look at the floating action button. And just as a reminder, that's the circular button that's used to promote a primary action on your screen. It's usually anchored to one of the corners or sides of the screen, or along the seam of two views. To implement it, it's quite straightforward. We simply add a floating action button view, and this extends an image view, so you can use it in a way that you're familiar with, but there are a couple of attributes that we'll look at specifically. And that's the layout gravity, which lets us anchor that to the side of our layout, and also the fab size. We have two options there, the normal size or a mini size. And as you can see, we've included this inside of a coordinator layout, because that lets us interact with other views. So we're going to have a quick look at adding a snack bar to the setup. Now the animation you'll see on the slide shows that when the snack bar comes up, it actually moves the floating action button with it. So snack bar is like a toast, except it forms part of the view hierarchy, so it actually interacts as part of your view. And what we've got here, this little bit of code, is to say when the floating action button is pressed, simply create a snack bar and show it. And that's what you're seeing in the animation. And because those two views are inside of the same coordinator layout, they interact with each other. And that's the coordinator layout in action using the default behaviors of those two views. One more pattern is the navigation draw that you should be familiar with. It's a flexible navigation pattern, and it usually slides in from the left. As you can see in the screenshot, it has a section at the top where you can put anything you want in it, and then the navigation items below that. And we've actually got a separator with sub-items in this one. So let's have a quick look at how we'll implement that. First, you'll see on the left we have the XML layout. At the top level of our layout, we have the draw layout. And inside of it, as the last child, we add the new navigation view. And that is effectively our draw that will slide out. And we've added two special properties to that. The header layout, which can be any XML layout that gets inflated into that top section of the navigation view. And then we also have the menu attribute. And that will look for an XML menu file that we've defined on the right of this slide. And that defines the groups and items that are in the navigation drawer. And you can see that we've got one group there and multiple items inside of it. And for each item, we can define the icon that's displayed and also the title that's text is displayed. So with those two files and the header layout, you can very quickly get a navigation drawer in place. So if you've been following along, you already have a materialized app. Isn't that fantastic? Well, almost. It's worth noting that although it's very easy to get started, there are a few tricky bits you need to master along the way. But don't worry, it's available online and a detailed code lab, which we'll look at in a second. It's also worth noting that there are a few bugs in the design support library, but there are regular releases that help fix those problems as they develop. So the Codelab I mentioned is a brand new material design code lab for building apps with the design support library. Exactly what we've covered today, but in a lot more detail. The link will be posted just after this Hangout, but that is definitely the place you'll want to start if you're new to material design and want to get going quickly. So there are no excuses now, it's time to get going. And here are some important links and resources. First of all, the material design spec. That's everything you need to know about material design. And we've also got the Code Lab, which I just mentioned, and probably most importantly, our Google Developers Africa community. It's the best community of the funnest developers in Africa. So be sure to check that out if you're not familiar with it. All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, Alex. That was great. I'm now going to hand over to Johan and Kenneth, who are going to field the questions that you may have and pose them to Android GDEs, Alex and Dario. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Hangout on Air Q&A app, or in the G+ event page for this event, or on the Google Developer Africa Community G+ page. So Johan and Kenneth, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so we're watching all the channels. If you have any questions, just pop them in there. So first one I got was, is there any downsides to actually using material? So does it take more battery? Is it a bigger app size? Is it only for certain types of apps? What would you say?
That's a great question. Basically, no, there aren't really any major drawbacks to implementing material design. It's really just what sits on top of your app. It's the UI layer. Although it's definitely not suited to all apps. I wouldn't use it for a game, for example. But for most general applications, it certainly is the design framework that you should look at.
We also got another one. Is it only on certain versions of Android? And also, will it be a problem if my users are running older versions of Android?
Another great question. Maybe this is a good opportunity to bring Dario into the fold.
Hello, guys. So going straight to the answer, actually, as Alex said during the presentation, so the material design supports apps running from API 7, which is the version 2.1 up. So there's no need to worry about compatibility issues. So it's good to go.
All the way back to Froyo. Wow. So I got another question about when you're putting screenshots on the App Store and it's a material app. Are there certain guidelines that you should follow? Where can you have a look at those?
Well, there isn't really any difference between providing screenshots when your design changes. It'll be done in the same way, but there are a bunch of tools available to help you make better screenshots. And starting with Android Marshmallow, there's a System UI Tuner developer option, which lets you set the status bar as you want it for your screenshots. And then also the Device Art Generator, which is available online, helps you put your screenshots in nice device frames and nice shadow effects. So you can get very good looking screenshots quite easily.
And I'll show you a link us, right?
I certainly will, yeah.
So we also got another one. Are only material apps featured on the App Store?
Aha, that is a question I've heard from quite a few developers, because when material design came out, it was obviously quite a lot of work to immediately migrate to material. So there's a concern that the apps might not be featured by Google, but Google have said that they don't only feature material apps. They feature well-designed apps and well-built apps. So you don't have to stick to material framework. You should do what's best for your product and your app.
I've got another one. So the support library, does it only point to that set of components you showed, or is it a certain guideline? It's principles, concepts that you can follow?
Right. So I mentioned briefly the support library family, and that means that there's actually a whole bunch of different libraries, and most of them are focused on features being backported from new versions of Android. But the design library is specific in that it adds new components and behaviors to Android. So the design support library does add new UI components, whereas the material spec, which is the online version of how material should work, that explains how it should work in great detail, whereas the design support library provides you with components to just add to your app.
I'll take the next one and quick too. I see someone likes the YouTube animations. Are animations, because I've seen a lot of them, and this person has two, when you scroll down and you see the header bar go smaller, is that built in? So are there animation libraries that you can use, or is that separate from material? How would you go about doing that?
Excellent. So one of the important parts of material design is to use motion meaningfully. And you described some good examples of that. And the support design library does help facilitate a lot of that motion, as we saw with the snack bar and the fab, and also the collapsing toolbar layout. The example about the icon animating is probably a brilliant example of the animated vector drawable. Now that is available in Lollipop and Up only at the moment. It hasn't yet been backported to the design support library, but I'm pretty sure we'll see it there soon enough.
Awesome. Well, those are all the questions I can see. Kenneth, I don't know if you can see any.
Okay. Well, thank you, Johan and Kenneth, for fielding all the questions. Thanks to everyone who asked the question, and to Alex and Dario for a great talk and answering our questions. Next, we have Hiren, who's going to tell us about a recent PHP conference that he presented at. Over to you, Hiren.
Thanks, Dale. So yes, I attended the PHP conference recently, and basically it's a conference that happens every year here in South Africa, and this year it happened up in Johannesburg, sort of early October. So the conference this year was centered around 1 day of workshops and 2 days of talks, and we, as part of the GDE program, we ran a workshop on PHP on Google App Engine at the conference. So I thought this was quite a fitting time to run the workshop. The reason being that PHP on Google App Engine is now generally available, which means it's fully supported and so on. So that went quite well. We went through the intro and a hello world on getting PHP running on App Engine. We also had some international speakers talking about PHP Composer as well as HTTP2. And then we had some passionate bunch of local speakers as well. So if you ask me what were the hot topics at the conference this year, they would have to be the conference, the workshop and the talk on Docker, the talk on PHP 7, talk on HTTP 2, and the workshop and talk on Laravel, which is a new upcoming PHP framework for the web. And if you ask me what the community were most excited about at this conference, so we all know that most of the web is run with PHP. And so the community and the speakers were mostly excited about the upcoming PHP 7, mostly because of its performance advantages over the previous version 5. So for those who aren't following the PHP 7 announcements, PHP 7's runtime is now close to that of Facebook's hip-hop runtime. So there's quite a bit of reason for excitement there. And then couple this with HTTP 2, and it means a lot of good things coming for the web coming forward. So there's a lot of excitement about these two things. So I just want to remind the audience that the talks for the PHP conferences are all recorded and will go onto YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and you search for the PHP South Africa user, you will find recordings for not just this year, but the previous years of conference as well. So if you are a PHP developer and you need to keep up to the industry with what's going on in the PHP world, I highly encourage you to check this conference out, phpsouthafrica.com. And that's the wrap. Back to you, Dale.
Thanks very much, Hiren. That's our show for the month. Thanks everyone for listening in and posting all your questions, and to Alex and the GDEs for joining us today. In the next few days, we'll be posting a link to the audio file as well as a link to the YouTube video. We'll put those in the G+ community. We'd also love your feedback for the show and any ideas for the next show. If you would like to speak at an upcoming event or be featured in our spotlight, also fill in the form. We'll make the links to those feedback forms available in the G+ group. So thank you, everyone, and see you next month.